Hello and welcome to another John's Comics with Kids. He's got an omnibus he wants to share with everybody show. It's an unusual experience these days with me. I'm always seeming to bring out an omnibus. I apologize for that. But in all good faith, I want to read books, and that's got a lot of books in them. You know, that's the benefit of the omnibus. Lots of good things to read. We were a couple minutes late, and usually there's somebody in the chat to complain about being late, but he's backstage. It's this guy.
I said you were you're getting desperate for somebody to be on these with you. So
I just wanted to make sure there'd be nobody in the chat to complain about being tardy.
Because I wouldn't shut up and kept talking. And you're like, we need to go live. We need to go live.
I just kicked you backstage and we just started off. Yeah. If you guys don't know JP, I think would be kind of shocked, but his link is in the description down below, along with almost nothing else. Like it's I didn't put a whole lot down there, but his link is down there.
Nobody looks at that stuff anyway.
Nobody does. Rod the Rican is in the chat. What's going on, Rod? How you doing, Rod? Good to see you, sir. He's blowing up. He's almost at 1,900, almost 2,000 subscribers, man.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah. Happy to be here for this. I've been looking forward to this stream. Well, there you go. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that, man. And I know he's a big fan of the lightning bolt sash costume she's wearing at the end of this run. Big fan. As we all are. We got Adam in the chat. What's going on? He says, but she's hot, which also should have been John McCain's campaign slogan. Oh, man.
Wow.
That's one way to go, Adam. John must really want to have shows about Omnis, getting desperate for a co-host. Well, there you go. It's all right. I already wrangled you into a sequel to this, so we're ready.
Wrangled me, tricked you. I don't know. There's a couple ways to look at that.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other. No. We got Jackson Roy Kirk. He says Avengers. Oh, wait, that's not tonight. I mean, it's kind of an Avenger. We have a couple of Avengers issues in this omnibus. However, issues you may want to not collect.
Yeah. Different time period.
Kenneth Bird is in the chat. What's going on, Kenneth? How you doing? Got Tony, the old wolf, in the chat. I hope your back is feeling a lot better, sir. I'm fine with Omni, John. I've been called so many worse things in my life. So.
I was gonna say that'd be probably an upgrade.
That's definitely an upgrade. Definitely an upgrade. No. So what are we doing tonight? We JP and I had put this omnibus, Ms. Marvel Volume 1, on my 2024 hunt list as an omnibus I was hunting for. Then JP let me know there was a new printing, and the reason I hadn't heard of it was because it was weirdly named Captain Marvel, A Hero is Born. Yeah. Ms. Marvel, A Hero is Born. And it's not any Captain Marvel issues. It's all Ms. Marvel, and then there's some team-ups and some Avengers and things. But it's not a Captain Marvel omnibus, despite having her name prominently on the front. And we'll get into the identity issues of Carol Danvers at some point here, but the title of the Omni does not help you. However, this is what it contains. Yeah, it is basically ostensibly the Volume 1 Ms. Marvel run, the run that was sort of famously cut short and that led to that Avengers Annual 10 first appearance of Rogue. So you get Rogue, you get Mystique, you get Lady Deathbird, you get all kinds of like other cameos and characters. There's a lot in this omnibus, but primarily what I want to tell people that are fans of Omni X-Men, this is a Claremont omnibus, like almost exclusively as the writer for 95% of the issues in this volume. It's written by Claremont, and I didn't realize this because I thought it predated his launch of Uncanny, but it actually ran about a year into his Uncanny X-Men run. Yes. So he was doing these books concurrently, which kind of blew my mind. I'm curious because I had only read a few of the things in this omnibus before we dove in. How much of this had you read in advance?
Almost none of it. So I had read none of the original actual main issues, like the 1 through 23. I hadn't read any of those. I had unfortunately read 200 and I read Annual 10. But most of my Carol stuff is much more modern. Is when I found the character and that kind of stuff. So I'd never gotten back to reading these. So this was a big interest for me. I wanted to go back and read where the character came from. I do have a question for you because this is not a huge Omni, but like you said, mostly a Claremont Omni, although there are some issues that are not written by him. Were you surprised it did not include the 15 or so issues, maybe it's a little more than that, of Captain Marvel of like when she first gets introduced?
You mean
or even just like
from the Marvel stuff.
From the Marvel Captain Marvel.
So this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you surprised her introduction wasn't, even if not the whole run, that her introduction wasn't included?
Yeah. So for those that don't know, JP's saying there are obviously a handful of issues in the Marvel superheroes featuring Captain Marvel.
And then the Captain Marvel, then he got his own series.
Then he got his own series after this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the introduction of Carol Danvers, the Air Force
working at NASA. Well, at the time, I think she's working at NASA and retired Air Force. And yeah.
I was a little surprised that none of those issues, even if they weren't just like segments or pieces of her early appearances, were included.
I didn't, because I didn't really look at it when I bought it, but I expected, not like that whole run, but I expected like her first appearance to be in there.
Oh, really?
Like, I would, just because it's like the beginning, but it's not. And none of that's in there. No. And I expected like her first appearance and what's the issue? The issue where she gets hit by the psychomagnetron that leads to her getting her powers. I expected those two to be included. I was a little surprised they weren't.
And I don't know if there's copyright stuff or they've got to pay those writers stuff if they're an artist, if they're going to include some of those others, because obviously this is mostly that Claremont stuff from the Ms. Marvel run.
And it could be that there's just some other stuff, but
so clearly Claremont was a workhorse at that time, pumping out several issues a month for the Marvel Dream Factory there. I want to ask you this because I'm curious about it. Could you give this omnibus as a volume like a letter grade and a simple basic review on now that you've had a chance to read it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have not thought about a grade for this.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, because I hadn't really thought about trying to give it a grade yet.
Yeah, for sure. I can say hello to Carlitos in the chat.
It's an interesting one to grade because I think I would grade, before you give yours, I think I would grade the 1 through 23 plus, as we'll talk about later, the 24 and 25 that eventually get printed differently than because of the other stuff that gets included here. Like, would definitely alter my grade for this.
For sure.
So go ahead. I'm curious where you're at on this.
I think overall this omnibus would get I'm going to be nice and go B- on this for me. I think there's stuff that I really like and we'll get into, stuff that I think is really entertaining. And there's a lot of information about the character of Carol Danvers that I didn't know that I enjoyed learning, but the highs are high and the lows are low. And when we get into some of the unevenness of the volume, that's where it gets tricky. I'm glad I collected the single issues of the run. I want to talk artwork because I do think the artwork is strong as far as like the Bronze Age Marvel. I was very pleased about the artwork overall. The workhorse team that's kind of behind this era of Ms. Marvel did a really stellar job for me. And the action, I was never confused. It was, again, it's classic Marvel Bronze Age stuff where it's the readability, other than, Claremont's giant paragraphs, the readability is strong for me. So that's that's what I liked about it. And what I didn't were certain issues, like you mentioned, Avengers 200 is obviously an eyesore, and it's hard to read it after having read all these other issues that were so superior. Yeah. It's almost like knowing that the finale of your favorite show is going to just take a big old dump, and you have to watch it all the way through to the end.
Well, and it's not just that, but then like they instantly brought her back to do the rogue thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a double whammy. It's just like bam, bam. We're gonna treat this character like absolute garbage.
Yes.
Although, and we'll get to it, there is a little bit. I do think they do give Claremont does a little better job in the annual that we'll get to.
Yeah.
Like there's a little redemption to the annual from Claremont, but
sure.
I think you're about right. I think a B- is a really good grade, as you were talking about that, because there's a lot of like there's nothing that would make it great. Although there's a couple of issues I think that are really, really, really good. But for the most part, it's really solid. It reads for Bronze Age and Claremont, who's known to be wordy. I didn't think it was really that bad in terms of like the wordy exposition.
Yeah,
like,
there were only a few times that it got.
I mean, like having watched the Omni X-Men with you and Justin, and the amount of like I didn't feel like we got some of those classic Claremont just exposition dumps. Like I didn't feel like he did that much here. Like we get with the X-Men sometimes. And so because of that, I thought it was much more readable than some of that stuff that there are times when, you see it like, and that goes for that's Claremont X-Men, that's Teen Titans, and those are some of the best ones from that age. Like
that age, yeah.
From that late 70s, early 80s that are like, it reads pretty well altogether. And I think a B- is a really good grade for this. I think you hit it on the nail. I wasn't sure where I was going, but after you, as you said that, I'm like, yeah, that's probably about right. I think it's above average. And I think in totality, I think if you take out the end of it, it probably jumps it to a B, a high B. Maybe it gets to a B plus.
Sure.
But I don't know if it quite makes that even without those issues.
And I think to Jackson's point, maybe if they'd included some of the Marvel stuff at the beginning, it would have raised the grade a little bit just to have that early first appearances issues as well.
Yeah, and I think I agree with him also. He talks about it gets better as it goes. We'll get into that.
Did we say hi to Drew Manchu, baby? What is going on, Drew?
Yet.
He says it's a great run. He says Carol's a hottie.
I do. If we get into the art, there's definitely like an emphasis on that the later you go in the arc as well. It doesn't get emphasized a lot early, but it gets more so as you further you go.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit at the very beginning. Issue 1 and 2 are exclusively the issues, the main issues that are not Claremont, right? These are the Jerry Conway issues. He launches this title, and the important thing to know that JP and I did not know and were surprised by is that this is not Carol as we see her in really any other run. This is not the soldier, the astronaut, the pilot, outer space, warrior.
No,
this is definitely a different side of Carol. And what I took away, and I'm gonna love to hear your thoughts. They felt like they were trying to make this a female character in Spider-Man's universe to me.
Yes.
And in a big way, they decided, you know what we'll do? We'll throw a few twists into her character that allow us to put her in New York, put her in J. Jonah Jameson's universe, make her a reporter / editor / I don't know, like woman in charge of this magazine that Jonah is publishing called Woman. We'll add a little backstory that, she wanted to be a writer before the Air Force, whatever. And then they spin her as like this woman with identities, right? She's the journalist by day, and then she's got this like schism in her mind and doesn't realize that she's also Ms. Marvel, the superhero with powers like Captain Marvel, who's going around fighting bad guys like MODOK. Yeah. So that's the premise of issue 1, and ultimately the mess that Claremont has to kind of clean up in his issues. Yeah. What were your thoughts on reading this? Because I got major Bronze Age Spidey vibes from this.
Oh my gosh! Like they like you read this and Jay Jonah is like the first like known Marvel character that shows up, and then suddenly she's like going to lunch with Mary Jane, and like you see Pete in the background like walking away just so just because he's there, and the first villain is the Scorpion. It's just like, and it's this woman editor, and it's almost like, okay, we want to have a female superhero. And we'll give her powers and like, hey, there's this character that we used to have, because I looked and it was the issue where the Psycho Magnetron and Captain Marvel, where she supposedly gets the powers, was November of 1969. Miss Marvel #1 comes out in January of 1977. And it's almost like they were looking for a character they could use, and they picked Carol, and they're like, well, she doesn't really fit what we want, but she's a known entity, so we're going to shove her in this book. And we're going to
explain her powers, and
don't really explain the powers at any point. We're going to get there, other than she's this Kree human hybrid, but what that means, never explained. No. Even under Claremont, it's like, what are her powers? And there's just 2 issues that feel very different, and it feels like Claremont basically spends the rest of the 23 issues that actually got published. Trying to undo those 2 issues and get her where he wants her to take her in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you get the feeling that the editorial was like not happy with what he was doing, so he had to like bleed it out. Like he had to slowly make her transition from this character that they had forced on him to the soldier superhero that he really wanted her to be. Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it, but there's a little intro to this from Conway, and it's so misogynistic. Like, it's just like, oh, we needed a woman hero. It was so like, I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh. And they printed it in here.
Well, and he talks, it even mentions how like he's just like, we didn't know what we were doing, and we were just making it up as we go. There was a boys club, and we were just trying to do what we could do. It's not like they put Louise on this at all. They could have put Louise on this book.
Yeah. But they put Claremont on it, and events after those first 2 issues. So
yes.
So I guess I'll just ask you, like, so what, like, I didn't like, because I found Carol later as a character. Like, I knew of her a little bit from as like Warbird and some other stuff from like 90s Marvel stuff, like a little bit, but I really didn't find her till like the Kelly Sue DeConnick becomes Captain Marvel run. That's really where I started reading and like enjoying the character. So this was a abrupt, like, and I remember looking at Miss Marvel #1, and like Pete and them are on the cover, like their faces are on the cover, and it's like, I'm like, what is this history?
Yeah.
So I mean, it was definitely jarring to see. It's like, this is the same character. What did you think? What did you think of this like setup?
My first Carol Danvers was binary. I got a lot of stuff. Her character always seemed to be in the X-Men books, and that's what I always kind of liked about her, was she was like an Avengers X-Men like bridge in a kind of cool way. And then, like you, I definitely read some of the Kelly Sue DeConnick, some of the later 2000s kind of stuff, and I definitely read, the period where she was on the Avengers in various different stages in big events in Civil War II or whatever. A lot of that stuff. As far as this run, I had only read a handful of issues here and there. Stuff with like the Deathbird issues, I had read some of those. And the Mystique early appearances, I think I had read some of those back in the day, but I had very little recollection of them going into this. And I will say, as far as those 2 issues, right, 1 and 2 are the ones without Claremont's name on them. For me, they are like polar opposites. Like, I read issue 1 and I was like, okay, it's kind of fun. I mean, it wasn't what I was expecting, but I think it works. I read issue 2 and I was like, I hope it's not like this. Like, it was issue 2 just felt trashy. Issue 1 felt like okay, it's quirky Bronze Age fun. And then issue 2 just was like, oh my God, please it can't be like this. Like, this can't be it.
Yeah. And I think for me, like and literally Claremont instantly tries to like fix it. It takes him a while to like undo it, because I think like you said, the editors made him slow play it. But the whole Miss Marvel's taking over my mind, and she's not knowing that she's Miss Marvel, and then that they don't like each other. And
Yeah.
like, it's just so bad.
Yeah.
Like, you know, her not knowing she's Miss Marvel, and she's like blacking out, and then finding out, and they're two separate people, and it's just such a bad plot point.
Yeah. And I'm glad that that's the first thing that Claremont does away with. And it takes a little while to get it completely gone, but he quickly phases out the fact and allows characters around her to start knowing the truth, her therapist and some of her friends. And then she gains the truth. And then it's like, how do I meld these two parts together? Because they're still separate, but now they're aware of each other. And then it's melded, and it's then less of a fractured disassociative mind kind of thing, and it's more of like understanding these two aspects of herself, the duality of superheroism or whatever. But that is a disappointing, frustrating thing for me. I did not feel like this story needed that in any way. I know they clearly wanted internal conflict for her, but there's a lot of things going on in her life that could have easily given them that nugget without this bizarre like mind meld stuff going on.
For sure.
Talking Bronze Age books, and Bronze Page Terry comes in. What's going on, man?
There you go. For sure. Go ahead.
Did it feel starkly dramatic for you when it veered to Claremont in issue 3?
Oh yeah, the writing. You can tell that there's a different writer. Like I do think it's really, for me, it was like issue 4. Like, I think it's issue 4. Like, issue 4 is the one without still on the plot on 3.
And then I don't think he's listed at all on 4, but
he's not listed at all on 4. And like, to me, if you got like 4, like by the time you got into like 4, 5, 6, it's like it's a very different book than it was in the first 2 issues, for sure. Yeah. And like, because even 3 to 4, there's like, I think the biggest shift is probably from 2 to 3. Now that you say that, but it's definitely a much better book. And I mean, it's a different book, even though like she remains the editor of like one of the stark things is like after issue 2, we never see Mary Jane or Pete again. Like, we barely see Jonah, although he's mentioned several times through the rest of the run. We see him like maybe twice, like in actual see him. Yeah. Like, start making the transition toward Avengers and other characters, and like very rapidly with Claremont.
Yes.
Like pulling her out of the Spidey world and like okay, no.
Which I think felt like an odd fit, and I do feel like she's always been a character that bridged, like we mentioned, to X-Men, Avengers, Spidey, Guardians of the Galaxy. I feel like she's got these she's never really had her own universe to play in. She's always kind of dabbled in everybody else's, and that's whether that's intentional or accidental. It does feel like they're always trying to figure out where to put her.
I think that's part of it for sure. Like they're trying to because Claremont doesn't really commit to the Avengers thing. I mean, no, like they guest star some, and it's like she interacts with them, and eventually you see he's moving her toward the eventual interactions with the X-Men. Yeah, but like that's not really going on here either. At least in this.
No, they don't really show up in this volume other than Mystique and Destiny.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Other than Mystique and the Brotherhood shows up right at but that's really not even that's the issue that that's like 25 or whatever. So we really don't see anybody other than Mystique from the X-Men side of things in this run either. So it's
totally,
and I don't know where you were going to go next, but and I think it shows in the oddity of the villains that we get in this run.
it's a diverse group. Right? We mentioned Lady Deathbird. I mentioned MODOK at one point. You mentioned Scorpion. It's an odd cadre right at the beginning that we're getting as far as who is going to be her nemesis and who is she going to be facing off with.
Yeah. I mean, because we get like several villains I've never even heard of. We get.
What's the one that's like a weird lizard beast thing?
Well, we get like these tail people. Yeah.
There's the Namor villain, the shark guy. Was it Tiger Shark?
Tiger Shark shows up. Grotesque shows up.
Yes, Grotesque. That guy is so weird.
What was the guy at the early on that like the Doomsday Man, which is the robot, and then there's the doctor with
there's
the
just
helmet.
some really odd choices. They never really find someone that's a good match for her.
The Elements and the Hecate, the Witch Queen, which doesn't really ever show up anywhere else, hardly, like in Marvel.
No.
Like, I mean, there's just some, like, she just fights some weird things at times. Again, it was a little bit like they decided to do this to another female hero they were trying to introduce. Conway didn't really have a plan because they instantly turned it over to Chris. And he's just trying to figure out, okay, like it feels like a lot of those from issue 3 to about 15, he's just trying to figure out, okay, who is this character? What am I going to do with her? Where are we going to go with this?
That's a great point, because I think that's what Magic Lasso said to me as well. And I know he's a big fan of this character and these early costumes and this early iteration. But even he was like, you got to give it till Mystique shows up before it finally starts figuring out what it could be.
Yes.
Yeah,
I felt like, I mean, it's probably jumping ahead a little bit, but like it didn't really figure out the book it wanted to be until about the time it got canceled.
I mean, yeah, I would agree.
So, I don't remember what the original question that sent me down that riff was.
No, I think it's just at what point did you feel like it actually was clicking into gear? And I think, for me, as much as I can appreciate the Bronze Age, like each issue has its own villain and it's kind of not a lot of bridging between issues going on. Usually it's resolved in one, if maybe at the most two issues. Yeah. And that stuff is a lot of fun, and it does have good, easy readability, and it's just classic, Marvel this era kind of comic. But for me, it got interesting with a villain like Mystique and kind of the backstabbery of it all that she was doing to this whole corner of Marvel's universe.
Right, and like having that little bit of through line, because she doesn't really appear like said her first appearance is drawn out like over the 3 issues, and like so you're like, who is this? But there's like the nice little nugget that carries on through that last third of the book or whatever. And I will say, like, one of the things that it took a while to find its legs, and then it was like, because it's very uneven in places. Like, I think like some of the individual issues are really good, but it's very uneven in places, even issue from issue. Because Jackson Roy talks about that, like she kisses like 3 guys in the first 3 issues. There's like 9 different love interests, and
a lot of love interests,
and like none of them that she's like super serious about. And it's like, although we'll get into the way the men in the world see her.
I was going to say, I want to get into the genders, because I think this is a very interesting book as far as like feminism of the early 80s and gender relationships and gender norms. There's a lot of stuff going on here that's both text and subtextually going on.
Yeah.
For me, if you're ready to get into that,
we can keep going wherever you want to go.
For me, it felt like this was Claremont and maybe Marvel editorial having comments on gender roles at this time. And there's a lot of discussion in and around who should she be? Like, who should Carol be? Is she this Air Force, pilot? Is she this managing editor and journalist? Is she this superhero? Is she Captain Marvel? Like, is she in some way connected power-wise to him? there are, like, to your point, several love interests. Key among them seems to be her therapist, which is so inappropriate in so many ways.
Well, from him, like, he is a awful person. For one thing, he is her therapist.
Yes.
And he becomes, like, obsessed with her during the course of this book.
Yes.
And he knows the truth. But, like, there's the one issue, like one of the last times we see him, and he, like, she's at some party, and he comes to this party, and he's making commentary like, I'm gonna make you mine. And, like, even though she was, like, there with somebody else and making out with somebody else at this party, and, like,
he has a thought bubble at one point that says something like, she doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to make her hang up the superhero life and live with me. He's basically saying that he's going to, like, madman her and, like, just, like, force her to be the stay-at-home wife. Like, he's got some very odd thoughts, considering he's apparently fallen in love with a woman who runs a magazine successfully, was in the Air Force, and he knows is a superhero who can defeat all of these villains. He's got some pretty backwards, antiquated views of her potential.
Well, yeah, here are some of the thoughts. He shows up at this party, and here are some of the thoughts he has. Haven't seen Carol much lately, but I've been thinking a lot about her a lot. She's become more than just another patient. I love her, and I want to marry her, take care of her. Trouble is, it's kind of hard to take care of a woman who's a part-time Avenger. Then he's like she's sitting with this other guy, and he just walks up and, like, how about a kiss, babe? And he, like, spills his drink on her. Like,
yeah, he seems drunk.
Yeah, and then, like, he takes her outside, and he's like, and she's, like, trying to talk to him because she's not interested. And he's like, hush, you shouldn't interrupt a man when he's telling a woman how much
it's crazy. You.
And then she uses the excuse of becoming a hero and leaves. And then the thought bubble is, there she goes without a goodbye or a backwards glance. I'm a stubborn man, though, Carol. By hook or crook, I'll have you as my wife, and then I'll end this Miss Marvel craziness forever.
It's like, it's so, I mean, yeah. I didn't even know what to think. And he slowly goes crazy. Like, he doesn't start this way.
No.
He starts with, like, you know, he's a therapist. He's trying to help her with this. She's having these blackouts. And then she transforms right in front of him, and he learns the truth. And he doesn't tell her for a while. He keeps this from her.
Yeah, she finds out on her own. She doesn't find out from him.
No.
Like, she figures it out eventually.
Yeah. What is up, Nigel? How you doing? This is accurate. This is a good summation of how he ends his storyline as her therapist.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then basically it transitions at that point away from being a therapist and more to him, like, once she knows, he's like, now I want to, like, date you. And they kiss and date a little bit, but then she's never interested.
No.
She's like, I'm dealing with real life problems, and you're just a weird therapist who's got a crush on his patient, and I don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
It's basically their relationship in the entirety.
Yeah. And then, although he does end up playing the motivation role at the end for, like, Mystique and all that kind of stuff. But even then, it's just like, you killed my friend. It's like, she's like, not like,
yeah.
It's not like you killed my boyfriend. It's like, yeah,
no. It's like I knew that.
Time we see her, she's like out on a date with some other guy.
Yeah, because she does date a few other guys, but he seems to be the most prominent love interest figure.
Like, he's clearly the others, like, that she goes on dates with and stuff are, like, you know, we don't see as much of them in terms of how they interact with her, but we don't get any of those kind of weird thought bubbles as we get from the therapist guy.
Yeah. No, not
like,
at
and
all.
He's there longer in the book than any of those, and any of the other guys, for sure.
On the same page, or sorry, not literally, figuratively on the same page as him, we have Jay Jonah, who is a much better foil for her, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In that he is successful, he is completely arrogant, he is always a misogynist. That's just his way. Yeah. And he works better as a foil for her. So when any of the magazine dispute stuff about how to run a successful magazine and I don't want to do this thing about women, but there's an audience for it and maybe we'll give it a shot. And then she proves that it's successful and she can kind of stand toe to toe with him. That dynamic I found more interesting. Even if I didn't need a Spider-Man universe thing, I did appreciate him as a foil for her.
It did work better, and it made the whole magazine side of the book work. Like, because I'll be honest, like it would not have taken much for that not to work at all.
Really?
Yeah, and the fact that like she was constantly like dealing a little bit like Pete dealing with the fact that she was disappearing, but she was still like not doing the magazine the way he wanted, but still being successful and not making him almost matter than if she had failed. And like, you're not doing what I want, and you're still being successful. I can't forgive that. It's basically what it's like you can be successful, but you have to do what I want.
Do it my way.
Yeah. And if you can't be successful and not do what I want. That's not allowed. And so, I do think that works pretty well, but it's also pretty clear that Claremont just doesn't want any part of that to me. Like
that, you mean that male-female dynamic, or the
doesn't
specifically
want any part
Jonah
of the magazine thing? Like it lasts for most of the run.
Yeah, I don't think editorial
he would have made, and he's trying to move her away from that.
Editorial clearly wanted the connection to Spidey's universe. Claremont clearly wanted to take her into a more cosmic place with the Avengers or whatever. He wanted a more challenging fight for her, not the street level stuff that you get in Parker's universe.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the push and pull going on with these books.
And Lasso is correct. Jonah knew how many superheroes that he like actually supported financially and helped. He'd have a stroke.
Absolutely. Well, and if he didn't have heroes to cover, his magazine and newspaper would fail anyway. Yeah. So
yes, this is true.
They're keeping him afloat financially as well as literally keeping him alive. So. For me, there's a lot of other issues thrown in here, and we talked a little bit about the way it ends, the fact that this was a run cut short, and there were issues that were planned that never got to be published, issues specifically 24 and 25.
Right.
And we'll get to some of the other issues they add on, but I do kind of want to spend a little time on the ending because I think it's interesting. And I mentioned to you when we were discussing doing this show that for me, two of my favorite issues in the omnibus are 24 and 25, which I got them here. Last year, I had snagged this issue of Marvel Superheroes Fall Special. It's number 11 or 10. Sorry, right? No, this is 11. Sorry, this is the second issue. And issue 10 is the first part of that. And so these are basically the opportunity for Claremont to come in and write out and tell the story he wanted to kind of end his volume on Ms. Marvel. They're published in an anthology book because you get several other stories mixed in. The reason why she's
Marvel Superheroes 80-page summer special and then Marvel Superheroes fall special. Like there are these big specials because you get the cover, but at least in here, you also get a title page. Like
you do, yes.
Like you get a cover page, even like in here for like 24.
So this one, by the way, the Ghost Rider story is drawn by No Good Comics' father. He does the Ghost Rider story in this one. So just if you're a LaRocque fan and you have this in your collection, it's also a minor key in that these issues are technically the ending of the Ms. Marvel run.
Yes.
They're published in 92, as JP said, which means there's a lot of years in between, about a decade in between when the run ended and when they're finally getting the chance to go back and do them. How did you feel like these two issues worked for you?
I mean, I felt like 24 was like the Sabretooth story arc, and it does progress the Mystique stuff just a little bit. But to a certain degree, I don't know that 24 was actually needed. I mean, other than it progresses it because we see the death of the therapist in here. Like,
yes.
So it's part of the issue, but like in terms of the whole Sabretooth stuff, it was just kind of another Miss Marvel story. But 25, like 25 is really the crux of everything he was building to.
Yes.
And sets up what happens in, like, I can't imagine having read through 23 and then whatever was, what we get that was going on in the Avengers, and then getting Marvel Annual 10 without 25.
Yeah.
Like, the whole, like, there's so much more here about what was going on. Like, we get a lot of the background from Mystique and Destiny here that we were not getting, like, that we hadn't gotten yet, to explain why Rogue goes after her, like, what all, like, there's a ton here that makes so much more sense than what we knew before.
And as a fan, as you're reading things like Avengers Annual 10 or the binary story that appears in Uncanny later on, it's always felt kind of amorphous.
Yeah.
How Carol lost the power that she had, how Rogue permanently gained those abilities, the connection between the two, and how Mystique and Destiny fit into that. And it always felt ill-defined to me. And I can't, and now that I've read these, I think that's the thing I got the most out of it, was at least it put a really big puzzle piece back in there that I felt like I had been missing.
Yeah. Well, and I really enjoy the fact that like we get to see, because we didn't know, like I said, we didn't know. Mystique is like starts going after her whenever she first appears. Like, she's in this background. She's like hunting Carol. She's sending people after her. And it's never really explained completely why until you get to 25.
Right.
And so you didn't get any of that explanation in Avengers Annual 10. No. And I do love that, and I realize this was written in 92, so it's later, but I do love, like good grief, like, Mystique and Destiny were always a couple. Like, even in this stuff, like, it's very clear.
Yes.
That they are, and I forget which issue is it. It's not 24 or 25. Is it one of the other extra? It's not 10, where they're like she's trying to break them out, and like out of prison or whatever, her and Pyro and Avalanche. I forget maybe that's one of the other extra issues. That is, maybe it is 10. What is that? I guess it is 10. Okay, that is 10. Okay, yeah.
With the Brotherhood?
10, it's very clear. Because, that's the Spider-Woman part. So, in Avengers Annual 10, it was so, like, I hadn't realized, like, it's so clear that Mystique and Destiny are.
Oh, my gosh.
It's just like.
Anybody that claims that it was, like, a shocking twist is, like, not paying attention.
No. I mean, it's very clear. But I do like, the other thing I do like about it is, it's very clear that, like, Destiny has told her this, but that Mystique is running a direction, and Destiny's like, no. It's like, you're everything you're doing is making this worse. I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Like, going after Carol is not the correct answer here.
No.
And, like, so Mystique is actually bringing about that which she sort of fears in terms of what's
self-fulfilling prophecy for sure. What is up? We got Sove Collector Michael in the chat. What is going on, sir? I chose to wear my new JP budget collecting shirt. I haven't
ordered my own shirt yet.
It's got the logo on the back too.
There you go.
So I'm looking spiffy. I got my budget collecting shirt. So you guys got to get your own swag. What is going on, sir? Good to see you. We're just basically discussing the odd way in which this Ms. Marvel run was cut short at 23 and the way in which in 1992, about a decade later, they went back and added these other 2 issues. If you guys haven't seen them, they're included in the omnibus, but it's the fall and summer specials of Marvel superheroes. I guess it's 10 and 11 are the issues that give Claremont the chance to publish an ending to this series. And I really loved them, and sounds like JP appreciated that issue 25 had so much story to them.
I would say, like, was it 15 from the moment Mystique appears?
Yeah.
To, and if you count 25, like those 9-10 issues are really the best part of this book, easily.
100%. And
it's not just because it's Mystique. It's just like by that point, Claremont had gotten the book where he wanted it, and he was telling it, and he knew what he wanted to do with it at that point.
Yeah.
And it just
it wasn't time with the magazine. It wasn't time with Jonah. It wasn't time with the therapist. It wasn't time with her schizophrenia or whatever. He was like, no, this is a good old fashioned Bronze Age superhero comic. And it's just a female lead. That's the only thing that's different about it. Yeah. And there's discussions of feminism and a woman's place, and, villains that are like, oh, she's just a woman. She can't beat us. And, she obviously overcomes and that kind of stuff. But that's the best stuff. I think he's able to streamline it down to the story he wanted to tell.
Yeah. And, we talked a little bit about like the therapist, but the other character, I think that really like where you get that dichotomy of what Carol wants to be and what men in her life see her as is her dad. And like, that's great point. And that's something that's come back later, like that we've seen over the years, that he was an alcoholic and he didn't think she should, she's a girl and she should just do female things. And the fact she joined the Air Force was completely basically to spite him, like to begin with. And,
and I'm trying to remember which, those were early on issues, the ones where they were fighting at the work site and her dad is he's in construction and she ends up saving him. Those were in the first half, right? The first like 15 issues.
I want to say they were.
And you get dad, who's very much like, she should be trying to find a husband. She should be having kids and not understanding her career pursuits and not understanding her superhero persona, because obviously she saves dad.
No, it's still kind of like we first see him in 13 and then 14 is the issue where she goes to like where he.
Oh, you're right. It shows her flying out from the construction site, right on the front there.
And she saves him, and he's still just like, even when like he's about to die and Miss Marvel saves him, he's just like, oh, let go of me. I would rather fall with the building. I would have been fine. Just like
that's a great. I'm glad you brought him up because his comments are so over the line.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my gosh. There's not there's not girl. He's not a good girl dad. No.
But what I do like is it's clear that she was trying in some ways to emulate him with her career choices, right? Going into the Air Force, this gung-ho, do-it-yourself attitude, the bigger, higher, faster, that whole thing. You can see it comes from a love for her dad, the way he raised her. And I do like that he is not just a villain. He's like, not just an antagonist,
her, but he like has very traditional, like a very old school traditional mindset. And there's also the fact that like her older brother passed, and so there's a little bit of that there. So he's not just a villain, but he is very like misogynistic in terms of
and like, antagonistic. For sure. And again, a better foil than the therapist. The therapist really falls short for me again and again. And
creepy. He's
just an odd character for sure. This volume also includes 2 Marvel team ups, a Defenders. 4 Marvel team ups, a Defenders, a 2-in-1, and then we'll deal with the Avengers issues at the end. What were your thoughts on some of these others? Obviously, it was mentioned in the chat. Claremont was writing Marvel team up, so some of those issues are just more Claremont writing. But it also seemed like ways, for me at least, to tie her to Avengers, FF, Spider-Man, and the bigger
I think it was really just like nothing really stood out about those stories other than it was just an opportunity to like pull her into the bigger Marvel universe and like make her a part of it. Because really, after those first 2 issues where they tried to force her into Spidey's corner of the Marvel universe, when he took her out of that, she was kind of just on her own. She ran into Vision a little bit once. She ran, a couple times she ran into Wasp and Scarlet Witch so she was starting to interact a little bit with the Avengers, but it was really just about, hey, let's tell a story where she's interacting with Spidey. Let's tell a story where she interacts with the Thing. Let's tell a story, where she's, there's the poker game issue or whatever, where they go. And,
which is another great dig at patriarchy in some ways, like this concept that the Avengers are getting together for poker nights all the time and no women have joined their game. There have been no ladies worthy enough to join their game.
All like, why is a woman in our game? Yeah.
And then Carol is the one to like break the glass ceiling. And of course, wouldn't you expect an Air Force pilot to know her poker and to know her cards and come into that game? And she wins. She's great. So I did love the poker games. I thought the poker games were really great and a fun inclusion. Lasso's asking a couple of questions, and I want to get to both of them. He's asking here about how do the Marvel team-ups flow with the rest of the story. But he was asking about the soft reboot, because somewhere around issue, like you said, issue 20 somewhere, new costume. We brought Marvel back for a moment, and it's like a relaunch, a reimagining. So both of those are kind of clunky plot devices. How are you feeling about how those pieces help this flow for you?
Like, I get where he's talking about, like the Marvel team up, especially the first time you get the 2-issue Marvel team up thing, like she just barely in the end of it, but it basically the first issue setting up the second issue. I think they picked, in terms of how they organized the book, they picked good spots to put them. Okay. And I was fine with it. I got what the purpose was. You could have maybe those could have been at the end because there wasn't necessarily any timing thing or whatever. You could have maybe grouped them a little bit different. I think having them in front of, before you got to any of the Mystique stuff at the latter half for like the first 2, because she's clearly in that costume. I thought it was fine. It wasn't like, it didn't feel like jarring to me that okay, like here's gonna be a side story that's taking place around the same time. I was fine with it, I guess, in terms of that setup. The other part of that, so I thought they placed them pretty well in terms of where they put them in the book, so it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like in the middle of a story or anything like that. Like, of course, most of the issues.
But as far as like the hard reboot of her with a new costume, like I loved the Marvel issue and the way it gives her a new costume, and I like the look of the new costume a lot better than the original one.
Yes, the new costume is definitely better. The black costume is definitely better than the original red and black costume. There is the whole weird thing at the beginning where she's getting the powers from the costume, but then not really.
Yes,
I want to get into the powers thing in a minute, but. Yes. The Marvel thing, like he is almost completely absent from this book. Like he doesn't show. What is that? Issue 20 when he shows up?
It's right around there. 21, it maybe even. No, it's 19.
No, 20 is when she gets the black costume, so it's 19.
19, yeah.
He shows up in 19 for the first time, and he disappears after 19.
Yes, he's in the one issue.
And then at the end of this, like when we're getting into some of the like wrap up stuff, like little things pulled from Avengers and elsewhere, where she goes to the great, like she missed his funeral and like, she wasn't, which I had forgotten that she wasn't a part of that story arc. And like, it just felt wrong. It felt wrong in a lot of ways that he was not. Like, I didn't necessarily understand why they didn't make him part of her story during this. As she's finding her powers and figuring this out, and like she didn't seek him out. He didn't like, oh, there's this hero that's calling herself Miss Marvel.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go find out what's going on here. And oh my gosh, who looks exactly like this person that I knew.
Yes,
and,
whose costume is clearly shaped after my costume.
Yeah, it's clearly based on my costume. That like that whole thing, it just felt odd and a little bit like a missed opportunity. Like I get wanting to have her separate, but it would have been, I don't know, it would have been nice to see the two of them interact a little more, I guess.
Yeah. But I did enjoy that issue. I did feel like it worked well for me. It just to your point, home. It was a lot late and it was very little. So it's too little too late in a lot of ways.
And it drew home the point that, like, where was this 10 issues ago?
Yes.
Like, that conversation needed to be 10 issues ago. And then maybe here and there, like, have him, like,
absolutely
interact with her.
Yes. Jackson saying, when both Carol and Marvell get drawn into the Avengers during the Kovac saga, neither of them interact, nor do they even stand near each other.
Which is like they weren't antagonistic. Like I realized they weren't a item or whatever by that point. But like, I don't know.
It's funny.
It was just it was a weird choice to leave him so out of the book.
Totally. The last couple things I want to get into because we're almost near the hour mark. It's hard to read this omnibus and not talk about Avengers 200. For those that don't know, Avengers 200 is an incredibly bizarre issue of Avengers that tries to and we were discussing this before we went live. It seems like it's all designed around how do we get Carol Danvers out of here? How do we get this character gone? And we're going to do something traumatic and then send her off into the galaxy somewhere. And then we don't have to deal with it anymore. And it's
send her to limbo. They're sending her to limbo. They're not even sending her off into the galaxy. We're sending her to pocket dimension.
It's dark. It's inappropriate. It's just bizarre. And it's easily one of the worst Avengers issues I know of. It's just downright awful.
I mean, like they include vignettes from like 197, 198, 199 before they even get to 200. And like when I was messaging you as I was finishing this, and I'm like, I'm not even to 200 yet, and I'm pissed off. There's literally a lot. Like when Wanda and Carol show up at Avengers Mansion, and Wanda's like, 2 days ago, Carol wasn't pregnant, and now she's 7 months pregnant. Something's going on. We need to figure it out. And Janet goes, yay, a baby.
Well, Janet's always problematic for sure.
But I mean, that was characteristic of the whole group.
Yes. Like, there was a lot of like, congratulations. This is so amazing. Not like this is alien. This is reenacting Alien, folks.
Yeah. I mean, and you get to like, and then after she has the kid in less than 3 days, like she like doesn't want to see it, doesn't want to be a part of it, and they're all like, oh, how could she? Like, like she's like, there's no.
And obviously it gets worse when the reveals start happening towards the end, for those that don't know, because she's giving birth to the child who also impregnated her. It's weird. And it makes, I still can't believe that enough people gave it a thumbs up to actually produce this. Like, it's just, it's shocking to me how bad.
Well, and he even says that like the worst thing is he says, well, I brought her to like, I saw her and I was like, oh, there's a powerful woman. I love her. So I brought her to Limbo and I wooed her over a few weeks. And finally, after I used some of Immortus's thing, I was able to like make her mine. And it was like, he just told you that he had the ability to manipulate minds. And Carol's like, no, I don't want any part of this. And then like she sees him and it's like, she starts acting weird and like, and they just let her go with it. Like, okay, have a nice life. Hope you're happy.
So bad.
It's so awful.
Yeah, it's just really bad. Obviously, I'm glad they included it because you can't ignore it. But it's just makes for very painful reading, and it's frustrating. So it's an issue I never plan to ever read again. Like this would be the last time that I probably read Avengers 200. And if you're a Carol Danvers fan, I recommend you don't. You just don't do it. Just don't. There's no need.
It's a terrible story for like what they do to her character.
Yes.
But it's an awful story for the rest of the Avengers because it makes them look terrible.
Yeah.
Like how they act and behave and handle the situation is just awful. They like make every mistake they can possibly make. It's just like none of the characters are served by the story in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Just have her quit. You know.
Honestly, there's a million ways to write this plot to give her the emotional stakes you want and send her away. This was the worst one. This is the worst of all the options. You mentioned wanting to talk about Rogue, and it's hard to ignore her when reading these storylines. I pulled out my ROM issues, which are not included in this omnibus, and I was kind of surprised by that. But obviously, they don't have Ms. Marvel, so why would you include them?
Yes.
Do you feel, on having read all of this, that you... Let me put it this way. I'm going to state my feelings, and then you can chime in. I feel this did not do what I hoped it would do, which was just completely explain and iron out everything I ever wanted to know about Rogue. Instead, it just felt like they blew Rogue's launch in so many ways, spreading it across all these different books. Even if 24 and 25 had been published like this, we still would have had a ton of the same questions about Rogue. I still would have felt very confused by the character and the design, and I would still have questions about how did she permanently get Carol's powers? Because she only touches Carol for one panel.
Yeah.
It's one panel,
long, but they only do it for one panel. So it's poorly.
It's not like they have this amazing splash page of like
they show her touch other characters for multiple panels. But she touches Carol for one, and it's too long.
One panel. It's too much. And I was expecting a splash or spread page of the two of them grappling together and memories flooding out of Carol and into Rogue and all of these things. I was expecting something grand.
Well,
and it was not.
And
it might have just been my expectations were so high, having been like waiting for this. As a kid, I wanted to see the issue where the powers transferred, and it was a panel. It was so disappointing that it was one tiny, not even significantly sized panel.
So, and even like we get like the lead up to the fight, like we see, like if you ignore, so Rogue's introduction, which was Avengers Annual 10, is Spider-Woman finding this blonde woman falling from the bridge.
Right.
Like, and then later we find out this Rogue person, who we don't know who she is, took her powers, and then we first actually see her taking Captain America's powers.
Yes.
Like hitting it. Like the thing that you're talking about, the whole sequence where she touches her form, that was the end of Marvel Superheroes 11 from October 1992 that they put in after, because they actually split that off from the main issue and then put it in after Avengers 200, because she comes back from Avengers 200 and immediately gets attacked by Rogue.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be in 25 or whatever, but it's like the way they did it here, they actually even split it from 25 to put it after the Avengers to make it chronological.
Yes.
And even there, it's like the way they did it, like Rogue just attacks her out of nowhere because Mystique has said this person's going to hurt them, and like Carol like grabs her and she touches her for up. She doesn't actually ever touch her on panel. You see her like reaching for her face.
Okay.
And then Carol's going, ah, and Rogue's like, oh, it was too much. And it's like, what? Like, but none of that's seen until 10 years later.
Yeah. It almost took till Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee before they got into some of that stuff.
Yeah. And it's just I want to deal with before I deal with the Rogue thing. I want to deal with one more thing with Carol here, which is like the back-to-back treatment of the character is the only and maybe this is why I really like Carol as a character, because the only thing it reminds me of is, and I think this is actually worse, is the disregard of Barbara Gordon from The Killing Joke when the editor told Alan Moore, I don't care, kill the bitch, whatever. We don't care about that character. She's not important. That's right. What this is. We're getting rid of her from the Avengers. We don't want her. And then, so yeah, the launch of Rogue is just weird. It doesn't make any sense. Even with the addition of the 2 issues, it makes a little bit of sense because you get the whole Destiny and Mystique and why Rogue went after her to begin with.
Right.
Destiny had seen something and you at least get that. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense. She barely touches her on the face and it's too much. And then you see her and then it's but in Avengers Annual 10, she making out with Captain America to steal his powers.
And it doesn't have any of the same.
It doesn't have any of that. Although, so
I wanted to comment on this because Michael's hilarious. I'm starting to regret collecting this run, second guessing it. So I will say the complaint for me, at least at this moment, is if you go into this hoping to get a better understanding of what Rogue did and how it impacted Carol and the whole thing, that's not what this is. That was my expectation, and my expectation was frustrated by what I got. What I got
you don't really understand it. It doesn't explain it any better than it was.
Well, and it just reiterates for me the concept that Marvel didn't know what it was doing with Rogue, and it is spread across ROM issues and Ms. Marvel issues and Avengers issues and X-Men issues before they finally figured out what they wanted to do with this character.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a scattered mess. And part of that seems to be editorial's issues with Carol and what they wanted to do with her or get rid of her or whatever. But as a Bronze Age read, that's where JP and I found a lot of enjoyment from this. Yeah. And the things we've highlighted on the positive side tended to be around the quality artwork and what Claremont was doing to gear away from what Conway had started, and the Spider-Man-esque kind of stuff Conway was doing and how it got away from that. So I'm happy I've collected this run. There's a lot of great characters that make their first appearances here, and I'm happy to have those issues and understand better how those characters were launched, even if the current iteration I like a lot better than the launch iteration. Yeah. But that's true of a lot of comic book characters. Wolverine is a great example of that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to discourage you collecting a great run to collect, because 23 issues is almost nothing. And if you throw these two, I got these, I probably spent less than $12 including shipping for these 2 issues. So you can collect this run for almost nothing, and even the Mystique books are coming way down right now. So don't be discouraged. I'm sorry if that's if we're feeling like this is turning into a White Whale Comics and John Crap Fest. I think
really just it is the only thing that we really crapped on in this was, if you came in late, the Avengers 200, and then the launch of Rogue. I will say, for Avengers Annual 10, to give it a little bit, they do a really good job here of setting up what will become Carol and Jessica's friendship, which has lasted all through the comics. This is the first time she meets Spider-Woman. That's a friendship that's a big part of both of their stories going forward. Right. They also do a really good, Claremont does a good job here of giving Carol the opportunity to tell the Avengers to stick it from what happened in 200.
Yes.
So there's there is some good stuff. It's just not a very good launch for Rogue. It's a poor, it's a poor way they launched her as a character. I will say, I'm curious from your standpoint of having read this and having read through all those early Rogue, X-Men, and the ROM stuff, which I haven't ever read the ROM stuff with Justin. Do you feel like they actually like, I know there's the one issue where like she gets confused, Rogue gets confused and has Carol's memories and stuff. What do you think about how did they actually make this affect who Rogue was? Or was it just to give Rogue powers?
I think it's twofold. It feels like definitely they wanted Rogue to have a cooler power set. That just taking people's powers for a little while was not going to be cool enough. They wanted her to have some permanent abilities, and getting rid of them from Carol was the easiest way to do it. You know,
they were getting rid of Carol anyway, basically.
Yeah, and I also think the other part of it was not knowing what they wanted to do with Rogue any better than they knew what they wanted to do with Carol at the time. Then it was, is she a villain? Is she a hero? Is she connected to Mystique? Is she not connected to Mystique? I think a lot of that stuff has been retconned a little bit later on when they realized what she was. And it's the same with Wolverine and a lot of other characters when they launch them one way and then realize, no, this is what this character could be. And somebody like Byrne comes along and, you know, all of a sudden you've got a better understanding of that hero, right?
No, and that makes sense to me. So I do have one additional question that I for sure want to get to before we go into any kind of wrap up here, which is, what are Carol's powers?
You just really got to stump me right at the end here with something that I can't answer. Yeah.
If you read this, like it's like, this is not the Carol we know now, because she's still basically, today's iteration still basically has all the binary powers without the binary look, plus like some other stuff. She has flight. She's just human Kree hybrid, whatever the heck that means. And she's invulnerable. But like throughout the whole book, like she's like, oh, I can't survive this. And then she shakes it off like it's nothing. Like she has no idea how strong she actually is, other than what flight. Early in the book, she's getting her powers from the suit, and then Claremont's like, no. Like, she got it from the transfer from Marvel when it's like, when the Psychomagnetron, like, he kind of fleshes that out. But, like, other than fly and be kind of strong, like, there's no real, like, power set here.
And I the reason that doesn't bother me, because it should, and I think it is bothersome, but the reason it really didn't stick to bother me was because what it played into was Carol not knowing and Carol trying to figure out, and Carol being afraid of things that didn't end up harming her, or not understanding the upper limits of anything she was doing. And I wish they had leaned into that a little bit and treated it like a learning curve instead of accidentally making it a learning curve. Because that's the problematic piece. It doesn't feel intentional.
Right. It wasn't that it was, that was my complaint, is that it wasn't like, okay, it's a mystery. She doesn't understand what she can really do. Like, let's make that part of the story. Instead, it was always just like, oh, this big thing blew up, and oh, look, she's fine. She didn't think she would survive.
Because, I mean, if they had scrapped the whole amnesia schism mind thing and instead made this I got exposed to this power and I don't understand it, and I'm always misjudging and ripping doorknobs off of things and not understanding how to fly. It would have been an interesting coming of age thing coming
if they played it as in like from the beginning of her, like where is this coming from? Why can I do this all of a sudden? What's going on? Like, would have been so much better than the I'm Carol Danvers and I'm blacking out and now I'm Miss Marvel. And
it's too much. I can't bear it. I'm fainting.
Her seventh sense thing, thank God that doesn't exist anymore. That was so annoying. Like so annoying. But so
again,
overall, like I know we like ripped on this. Overall I enjoyed the heck out of reading this, but it was just funny to me the way they didn't know. It was clear they don't know what they were giving.
And that was my biggest takeaway, was like, this is classic Bronze Age Marvel fun, but around the edges, fans like you and I and others in the chat who like Mystique, Rogue, Carol, Lady Deathbird, Marvel, we can get frustrated with the minutia of the content going forward, because we know where they end up. We know where these characters end or where they are now.
Yeah.
And we have that hindsight hurts us as readers,
bit,
right?
Yes.
Because we're going to come at this from the perspective of, why did they do it this way? Why didn't they do this? What is this? What a horrible choice that is.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's clearly on the Marvel editorial side, disagreement about the character, who liked her, didn't like her, what they wanted to do with her. And the same with Rogue and the same with Mystique. And I think that's what hurts the books as like a look back and a connection to where they are now. That's frustrating. But as an entertainment piece, as an individual issue or two or arc,
it's fine.
That's the fun of it.
I mean, it goes to like what are her powers, goes to the same thing of why is she a magazine editor and all this kind of stuff that they were trying to build this character and they didn't really have a goal in mind.
They didn't. Yeah. They were making it up as they were along.
It's very clear that Conway, like, I'm going to introduce a new female hero, and then they handed the book to Claremont and said, run with it, and there was no plan.
No.
And it took him a little while to figure out what his plan was.
Yeah, about a year. He wrote the book for about a year before he seemed to have like a sense of, okay, I think I know what I want to do with this.
Yeah. And and once he did, the book actually is really pretty good. I mean, it's a pretty good read at that point. Yeah. And it's a fun read at times before that, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just
and I liked issue 1, the Conway issue, a lot. But it was more just because it was a good launch. Like the action was interesting, the character dynamics was interesting, the artwork was strong. I didn't love the costume. I still don't understand the belly button midriff thing that they have going in those early issues. And that costume is odd to me. I much prefer the one that they get at issue 20.
You mean like well, in the back is the same.
It's a weird diamond shaped thing going on there.
Yeah, because like when you see her from the back, like it's just like what?
It's an odd design.
It is a very odd. It's why they didn't just make it red all the way down, and then
you got to make her spicy. That's what's gonna sell.
Well, I will say, like, we didn't really talk about that from the art standpoint, but yeah, you get into the second half of these books, and there's some scenes like when she goes to the desert to fight the lizard people, and suddenly she's in a shirt and it's all tied underneath her. I mean, like the level of sexiness continues to escalate related to Carol throughout the book. Like in the early issues, it's just the costume, which they do eventually get rid of the diamond thing and then make it all red, like a full red piece.
Yeah.
But like, where is it? Where she's fighting, when she goes to fight the guys in the desert, and it's like,
is that issue 21 or 20?
No, I thought it was before then.
Oh, okay.
When does she fight the lizard people? I forget.
I thought that was, I see one of them on the cover of issue 20.
Oh, maybe it is issue 20 then. Okay.
But I think they came back.
Yeah. Yeah, 19, 20. Okay, yeah, 20 is where that really. No, 19 is where the scenes I was thinking about are when she first interacts with them. When she's looking for her friend, and she just like you see her in the initial scenes that she's got like a white shirt on, and then by the time she's out in the desert with this general, it's like, oh yeah, this is how I want to like.
Yeah, it's like, good Lord.
Yeah.
It's casual wear, business wear, whatever. It all works. They got rid of the 2 diamond piece things because the colorist didn't know it was supposed to be skin there and just colored it for a few issues, and then they kept it that way.
Well, it made more sense.
It looks better. I mean, I look at issue 7 where she's fighting MODOK, and then issue 9 where she's fighting Deathbird, and it's like the improvement jumps a bunch there.
Yeah, just by adding in getting rid of the weird belly button
cut out.
Because they were trying to make her reverse, Power Girl, give her the abs, show off the abs.
Yeah, right. The lower half, not the upper half. I get it. The diamond slipped.
Anything else?
No, I mean, that was 99% of what I wanted to cover. I think the volume, I'm happy I read it. I'm glad I have a better understanding of the launch for Carol as a superhero, Mystique, Destiny, Rogue, Lady Deathbird, I think I got a lot better understanding of all of that, and I appreciated kind of taking the time to do this, and thank you for taking the time to chat about it.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. I'm glad we did this. It's one I'd been wanting to read as a Carol fan, wanted to go back. Overall, like it was a fun read. I'm glad I read it. We'll ignore 200. I'll pretend it doesn't exist. But otherwise, yeah, it's a really solid read. And Lasso, and I like that Lasso talks about the costumes, that like the red sash is continued. She still has the red.
Yeah. He definitely was. Sorry, it's down here. Definitely a fan of the costume that we liked, and when she got it towards the end of the run, but used the scarf from the first part. Yeah.
And and I think it was interesting to read the initial Mystique stuff, and I thought it was really cool to see, like, even here Mystique and Destiny were clearly a thing, like from day one, like, and so there's some there's some time, dated parts of this book, but overall I thought it was a fun read. It was solid. Cool. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. We do have loose plans, JP and I. I've got a few Omnis that I'm working on, but both of us have this Catwoman East End.
I knocked over my water. Sorry.
Don't ruin anything.
No, it's on the floor. There's nothing right there that's going to ruin, but.
So that's my next omnibus that I'm going to try to work on before Omni X-Men comes back. And if JP and I both get it done in time, we'll definitely chat with y'all about how this one goes. This is the Ed Brubaker, Darwin Cook volume. It's actually several. I can't remember how many volumes. It's Catwoman 1 through 37, Catwoman Secret Origins 1, Detective Comics 759 to 762. So it's a few different pieces, but it's mainly that big 37 issue volume of Catwoman. Omni on a Catterday. Oh, there you go. I don't own the Savage She-Hulk Omni. I do own the Sensational She-Hulk Omni, though. I do.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't own either of those at this currently. So, any of the She-Hulk Omnis. But
for those that aren't following JP, he did a really great Cash or Trash recently with Marcus from Circumstances. I just rewatched that. I finally watched the rewind. Definitely worth checking out. They had great discussions around the books on the list this last week. I'm going to be over on Gary B, the Casual Comic Guy's YouTube channel tomorrow, talking about I'm doing a 10-1-1 episode with him where the 10-1-1 are not comics, they're just movies. So we're going to have a lot of fun DVD movie talk. I got the movies picked out already. If you've been watching my Instagram, it'll be none of those movies. I picked the movies first, and then I started playing that game. So none of the movies that are there are going to be showing up here. So should be a good, fun discussion. Nice. Anything else coming up that you want people to know about? Any things that they should be aware of?
Trying to get back to my schedule a little bit. We made a few tweaks. I think I'm going to make a few more to the look back a little bit. Obviously, I made a big tweak to Cash or Trash by bringing Marcus in, Circumstances, which was the original plan for that show, and I just never got myself a co-host. like 4 years ago, whenever I started doing that, I was like, I should have somebody to bounce this off of.
Sure.
And I just never did it, and he's graciously agreed to at least be the part-time co-host. I may try to get just because if he's not always available on Mondays and stuff, and so I may try to get another person or two that so he's not always having to do it with me. Although he's more than welcome, but it's just kind of
it was a good combo. You guys were great together.
Yeah, so just making it work for both of our schedules so that he can be a part of it as much as he wants, but not have to feel obligated to be there every week. Maybe I can get somebody else.
Totally get it. Yeah, makes sense.
But I do think that works better. And then we'll see. We'll see what else I come up with as we go through here. So.
Can we blame it running long?
D&D over on Whitewell's channels on Sundays.
Yes, Sunday nights. You can catch us over there on Whitewell Comics playing D&D. And then hopefully we'll be back soon with another omnibus. I'm glad you're enjoying this, Michael, because I loved it when I read this as a teenager. I think I read it in my late teens when they were publishing those. I've never finished it, and I bought the omnibus just so that I could read it in its entirety. Sorry. So I'm glad you're enjoying it because everything I remember about it, I really loved.
Nice.
All right, gang. So that is it. I hopefully follow Gary B. I'll be over there tomorrow night. And until then, I'll catch you guys later. Oh, sorry. This weekend, way too many sports going on. You will not see me on Saturday or Sunday, probably till Sunday night. I think 3 soccer games and 4 volleyball games. It'll be exciting. So,
Nice.
But I'll be posting stuff from the sidelines with my Omnis or whatever I'm reading.
Thank you.
All right, gang. Have a great night. Thank you so much.